Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Your host is Dane, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. This week, Dane is joined by Massimo Backus, the author of Human First, Leader Second: How Self-Compassion Outperforms Self-Criticism. As an executive coach, facilitator, and speaker, he champions the revolutionary mindset that self-compassion is a leadership epiphany. In today's episode, you'll gain insights on, first, the power of meaningful team check-ins. Massimo explains how asking 3 questions: how are you feeling? What do you need? Is there anything else you'd like to share? Helps create space for honesty and connection within teams. Second, flipping the leadership paradigm to embrace humanity. Leadership starts with recognizing and accepting your emotions and vulnerabilities rather than denying them, to show up authentically for yourself and your team. Finally, resetting accountability through a social contract. Explore how teams can redefine shared responsibilities by creating clarity and expectations, ensuring everyone takes ownership of their role and actions. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group, and today I'm joined by Massimo Backus. Massimo is the author of Human First, Leader Second, and he's also the founder of Massimo Backus Leadership. So we're going to be talking about some pretty cool themes, particularly around self-compassion and awareness. Welcome to the show, Massimo.
Thank you, Dane. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited. I think this is a big space that you're working in, which I've been doing a lot of personal inner work in recently too. So I'm ready to get stuck in. And before we do that, maybe you could provide us a little bit of a backstory. How did you come to be doing all this really cool work?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I may ask you some questions, Dane, about that internal work to see how we can tie off on some of these ideas.
Yeah.
So my work right now, the thing that I'm most passionate about is this concept of self-compassion, this mindset of self-compassion, and sharing it with as many people as I possibly can. And that was the reason for a book, as a way for me to share it more broadly than just the conversations that I have with clients and whatnot. But how I came to this, it is really by accident. Prior to starting my own consulting practice, I was running global leadership development for a company called Slalom Consulting, a large international technology systems integration consulting firm. And in that role, I was running leadership development programs all over the place. And they were these really powerful, transformative programs where people would have the aha moments that would shift their careers, shift their personal lives, and really help them have that unlock to achieve what it is that they aspired most for, both personally and professionally. And I mistook their growth and development for my own. That I thought, because I was front and center to all of these people's transformation, that I must be transforming myself. And I couldn't have been further from the truth. And a part of the time that I was doing this, I participated in a 360 assessment to get feedback from my team that I was leading, to find out how am I doing as a manager, as a leader. I was talented as a facilitator and as a coach, but I guess I had some uncertainty around what blind spots might there be, although I thought that I was doing a good job. And the feedback that came back was devastating. It was so far from my own self-image that I didn't even know what to make of it. The team said that I didn't create psychological safety, that they didn't trust me, that I wasn't creating a space for open conversations and debate, that I would shoot down their ideas. One employee described me as a bully. And the biggest theme was that I was defensive in all regards. And I thought, what do you mean I'm defensive? I'm not defensive. You're being defensive for telling me that I'm defensive. So that's how deep I was. I was completely lost and unequivocally defensive. And I spent the next 6 months trying to work on that. I thought, I teach this for a living. I should be able to apply these skills to myself, and I'll figure this out in short order. And 6 months later, I sat down with my manager and I was having this review conversation. Hey, I've been working really hard. What do you think? And they said, we can tell that you've been working really hard, but you have not made very much progress. And I was pretty sure that in that moment I was going to lose my job. But instead of that, they invested in me. They invested in my growth and development. And I ended up going to a program called the Hoffman Process in Napa in Northern California. And it was a week-long retreat, different than anything that I have ever done in the corporate training and development space. Your cell phone is taken away from you. There were large portions of it that were silent. I tapped into meditation and mindfulness and spirituality and all these things that were a bit distant from me as somebody who has an academic background in organizational psychology. And around the third day of this retreat, I noticed a big shift had happened for me. And it was a silence in my head, that this voice that was always present, that I wasn't even aware that the voice was present, was gone. And that voice that was gone was this hypercritical voice that I was always under attack, basically by myself, always criticizing and judging myself. And therefore, it was coming out in my relationships with other people. And what replaced that voice was self-compassion, was an acknowledgement that I'm human, that I'm fallible, that I am not perfect in all ways, that I have strengths and I have plenty of weaknesses and shortcomings as well, and that I was able to accept all of those aspects of myself. And it was truly an epiphany. It was a turning point. And since that day, that has been my North Star, that everything that I do personally is to try and live in accordance with that experience of self-love and self-acceptance. And I kept that experience mostly to myself for many years, but in working with thousands of leaders intimately in coaching and in leadership development programs, I couldn't help but see that there were commonalities between my experience and others, that they were also riddled with the tyranny of self-criticism, judgment, perfectionism, never being satisfied with enough power, authority, influence, title, success, money. And I started to do some research on who's writing about self-compassion for leaders, for organizations, because I wanted to share that with these people. And while there had been 20 years of literature largely led by Kristen Neff and Chris Germer and others, there was nothing written in a vocabulary and a context that would be relatable for people that are in business. It was often written in soft pastel tones that I think people would reject as wooey, as opposed to realizing what I realized, which is the hardest thing that we can ever do as leaders is actually learn to be kinder to ourselves. It goes against everything that we believe that we're supposed to do. It's incredibly difficult. And that was the impetus for me to start what has really been kind of a Sisyphean journey of writing this book.
Very cool. It's a great story. I appreciate just how candid and vulnerable you are in sort of sharing that shocking moment early in your career too.
You know, it is important for me to be authentic and vulnerable and transparent in sharing it, because I want to normalize it.
Yeah.
Like it is scary, but what you discover on the other side of it, it is far less scary on the other side than you ever think that it would be.
Yes.
And what's scary is living your life not learning about this, living your life not developing this skill set. That terrifies me.
Yeah, it does. I agree with you. I've been working with a coach for a while, and Christopher, and one of the things that Christopher's been sort of driving me on is so many of us are just on autopilot. We're asleep at the wheel going through life. And, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years goes by, and you're letting yourself be driven by fear or anxiety or this hypercritical voice, and you're not being aware of how you really feel. You're not being aware of trusting your abilities, insights, experiences. And it's at first very confronting, as you've said, but then very freeing as you start to embrace it. So I'm very early into that journey. Certainly haven't spent the time that you have researching or being in a retreat like that, but it's been confronting and wonderful at the same time.
Yeah. Well, we need to be able to think about treating ourselves as we would treat a dear friend, somebody that we really care about.
Hmm.
And if a close friend of ours discovered something about themselves that wasn't noble, that maybe they had shame around, or they felt guilty about how they had treated other people or had been, and they were trying to make sense of it and trying to change it, how would we treat them? Versus when we identify a problem with ourselves, whether it's through feedback or making a mistake, our first response typically is to be abrasive towards ourselves. And I'm by no means, self-compassion is not about losing your edge or giving yourself a pass or a way out. The 20 years of research shows that it's actually quite opposite, that those that practice self-compassion have a greater sense of resilience, persistence, grit, an ability to overcome setbacks, a greater sense for innovation, for collaboration, all of these skills that we want to have more of in organizations. And we've discovered self-compassion is a powerful catalyst for that. And yet it's still in its kind of nascent stages of people being aware of what it is and how to practice it. And part of that is debunking the myths around it. But it is a forcing function for so much good, that we have to overcome the judgment of what it could be to be curious enough about what value it could offer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've met with a lot of leaders over the years who have said, hey, I'm not here to look at the inner work that you need to do as a leader. I'm here to drive performance. And so I'm bringing a coach in to work with you on your performance and what you need to do differently with the team. And it always starts with like the external. It doesn't actually start with that reflection and working on the internal side. You do a lot of coaching yourself. Like, how do you, now that you've done this research, you've got this book, how do you tend to sort of kick off and frame that element of the work with teams and leaders when you engage?
I approach every engagement differently, Dane, and to try and meet someone, where they're at. But oftentimes a good starting place is to get a sense of what is someone's own self-image. And that's through their values, their likes, their dislikes, the things that trigger them, their hopes, dreams, aspirations, the things that they're trying to hide from other people.
Yeah.
What is their version of armor that they're holding up? We're all holding a shield, and those shields get really heavy.
Yeah.
And so understanding what that is. And I never introduce self-compassion as, here's the cure-all solution. In fact, it's usually something that's experiential with my clients or in my programs. And after someone has experienced it enough, then they'll come to me and say, so what is this that we've been doing? I've noticed I feel different, or I've been responding differently. And that's when I talk about, well, this is self-compassion. Let's talk about what that means. And that's not intended as a bait and switch, but I'm not trying to serve somebody medicine. I want them to step into it. And my genuine goal is to help other people find a path towards their own epiphany.
Yes.
Because that is what leads to the choice of, do I want to live and lead in the rest of my life from a place of self-compassion? And it's a daily choice. There are some days where I'm quite self-compassionate, and there's some days where I'm really quite awful to myself. I'm not perfect at it, but I've made a commitment that I will try every day. And I'm curious, in your work with your coach, what have you discovered as that tension for you? That when you explore that internal work, what's the friction? Is it criticism? Is it perfectionism? Is it having exceedingly high standards?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the two main things that we've identified is one, setting a very high bar for performance, and expecting to be able to perform such that I get embarrassed or ashamed if I haven't performed. And then separate to that is a difficulty in just generally processing emotions, because having grown up with a father who was I had a very privileged childhood. He was in an executive role, very strong, domineering character, but didn't really display a lot of emotions. You didn't really see those patterns. And so I kind of grew up thinking, well, I want to be like dad. I want to be strong and tough. And so I find that that's what triggers me in business, is that when I run into these moments of like, hey, we had a miss here, we had an error there, I really struggle to process those emotions and accept that was an issue. And what it does, I then dive in and just go straight to action mode. Like, all right, I'm putting on my gear, carrying my shield, to your point, and I'm just going to go in and do something to bust through this. And I find that can actually, harm me, harm my family members at home who deal with the fallout when I get home at the end of the day, and harm my team members, because I'm just going into like get it done mode, and I lose my curiosity.
Yeah. So you skip over the emotion out of the discomfort or not knowing how to process it and move into action, but the emotion is still there. So it's actually flavoring or coloring the action that you're taking.
Yes.
So I very much, would do the same things. And one of the most powerful things that I've learned through work like nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's work, or Dan Goleman's work in emotional intelligence, it is, emotions are data. Every emotion, every feeling that we have is just a data point. And as a scientist looking at data, we have to be objective, right? We can't judge the data. We have to say, like, what's the data telling me? And being objective around our emotions prevents us from having feelings about our feelings, which is, I'm angry again, so now I'm disappointed with myself for getting angry again, which is just going to slide off. The research shows that when we name an emotion and we can be objective about it, that emotion passes within 30 seconds or less. So as opposed to having emotions building on emotions, because we have feelings about our feelings, we're able to process it. And then we're able to identify, what is this trying to tell me? And we have to disassociate, because oftentimes people will attribute an emotion to a part of their identity. I am angry, as opposed to I'm feeling anger. There's a very big difference there. And when we recognize I'm feeling anger, we can get curious about that. Well, what might I be feeling angry about? And is it really anger, or is it disgust? Or is it I'm feeling rejection? Mm-hmm. What's the flavor of it? So we increase our emotional fluency. And when we get clear on what is the data telling us, then we get to choose and say, like, right now is not a good time for action. I need to do more exploration. Or before I take action, I need to have a conversation with someone. Or I need to go for a walk before I fire off this email, right?
Yeah.
I've had so many clients that you have a folder in their email that's all the emails they didn't send and they shouldn't have, right? But I don't even think those should be stored anywhere. I think that should be deleted.
Hopefully one day the AI can come in and actually just say, whoa, hold up. You're not even going to be able to write the rest of this email.
Yes, AI is like, alert. Yeah. I love that.
No, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, it's good.
I mean, that's really interesting the way you explain it there, Massimo, on feelings about feelings and what's that trying to tell you. Because one thing that I've found working with Christopher as my coach is that when we recognize that feeling, that emotion, and we treat it as data, and we do get curious and say, well, what's that telling us? Oh, it's telling us that I'm worried that we didn't make this decision, or I'm worried about how that person's feeling and how that reflects on me. And then we can actually start to externalize the action as far as, well, what action's going to help bring other people and other data into that context of, well, what's the best next step? So I think allowing yourself some time, whether it's the walk or something else, is very powerful.
And it also helps us develop the skill of not needing to take action on emotions when we hear it from others. So if you think about this, the context of a team, if someone comes in and says, I'm feeling really stressed today, our reaction, because we care, is, well, I don't want them to be stressed. Or for people that are highly empathetic, I deal with this. If someone's stressed, then it makes me stressed. It's not their fault, but I end up noticing that, I'm somehow picking up on that. But to be able to name it and be objective about it keeps it at enough of a distance to go, okay, this is an experience I'm having. It's a physical sensation, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't have to last forever.
Yeah.
And a team activity that I really like to do, especially when we're starting a large event or a seminar or workshop, is for whoever is on that project team, whoever's going to be there kind of leading the session, to sit down before all the participants and the audience comes in and check in with each person and ask them 3 questions. How are you feeling? What do you need? And is there anything else you'd like to share? And the trick is with the how you're feeling is to be curious about it, but not feel the need to fix. So if someone's tired, maybe they don't need you to go get them a coffee. Maybe they do, but that's where the what do you need comes in.
Yeah.
But just let them express it and be present for that.
Yeah.
So that they can give themselves the distance to be curious about, like, what am I feeling and what does that mean and how is that informing what I need? The question around anything to share is really, it could be the tactics. Hey, the timing on something got adjusted, or here's a quick update. But it's kind of the quick hits of facts that are immediate. And then the need piece can come back to what I need from the team today is a little bit of grace, or I need to go walk around the block really quickly before we start. I need to get some fresh air.
Yeah.
And a few years back, I did this with one of my teams, and a woman on the team started crying when she was talking about how she's feeling.
Yep.
And it was nerves and whatnot, but what it really was is she cared so much that she didn't want to let anybody down. And what she really needed is affirmation that we had her back.
Yes.
Now, if she just said, oh, I'm feeling anxious, and we just kind of launched into like, oh, no, you got this, that would have fallen on deaf ears.
Yeah.
As opposed to giving her the space to really say, like, this is what the experience is.
Yeah.
And adjust some things to help her feel secure and supported throughout the day.
That's super powerful, Massimo. I've had a previous guest, Rachel Yanis, on the show, who talked a lot to when someone brings an emotion to you, they share how they're feeling. That need to just get in and fix it or rationalize it and say, hey, you don't need to worry because of this, it actually makes them feel worse. And I think the way you're describing it is validating. Oh, I understand that's how you feel. What do you need? You're giving them control. You're almost co-regulating to say, well, where are we going to go now that we know that emotion's there, rather than you shouldn't have that emotion, which is the default response of most leaders, sadly.
Yeah. And everyone's doing it, so no one's on the spot, right? Everybody has to say, what do you need? For some people, they might need to go get that coffee, and for other people, hey, I need some reassurance.
Yeah.
But it's something that can be done before any team meeting, and it goes by very quickly, but it helps us understand really where everybody is.
Yeah. And
what we were talking about maybe before we started recording, Dane, is this is about having personal accountability. Like we put so much responsibility on managers and leaders in particular to be all things to all of their employees. Yep. This is saying we're going to create the space and the conditions for you to say what you need so that you can be accountable for what that is. And we're here to support you. But the burden is on each of us to do that, because fundamentally that is our responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's responsibility of the manager and the leader to create the conditions for someone to say that.
Yes.
And I think that's where it ends. It is not their responsibility to fix all of those things for other people. I could never have taken away the anxiety that this woman was feeling, but I could understand it. I could empathize. I could validate her, and I could affirm her and let her know that I was there to support.
That's powerful. That's really powerful. And I love that you do it in a team construct, because it's modeling behaviors, it's creating psychological safety. And it's just going back to the title of your book, it's very human first. Like it's setting the tone, it's setting the behaviors out right there at the top of the event.
Well, as you were talking about having really high standards and expectations and then feeling bad when those aren't hit.
Yeah.
The whole notion of this idea of human first, leader second is that we have, since the 1800s, Industrial Revolution, Milton Friedman, we've been in this culture that is and I'm not against capitalism when I say this, but it's always about up and to the right. Every year needs to be better than the last year. And if it's not, then something's wrong. But we're expecting that from humans, and humans are natural beings. And in nature, there are cycles, there are seasons. It's not up and to the right in nature. And so we need to flip the paradigm from leaders learning to be more human, which is what the last 40 years has been. You know, emotional intelligence is trying to reskill people to be more human, to know how to feel, right?
Yep.
Like, we've already been feeling. It's happening whether we like it or not. Or to help people learn how to be more vulnerable. We are all vulnerable. You and I, we are mortals. We are going to expire at some point in time. We are vulnerable. So it's not learning to do it. It's learning to stop fooling ourselves in that these things aren't real. To stop fooling ourselves that we don't have this emotion, or fool ourselves that we aren't vulnerable. And that means embracing our humanity first. And when we do that, we are internally resourced as that human to be the best leader for others. The mechanistic up and to the right stuff, AI is going to take care of that for us.
Yeah.
And we're never going to keep up with that. But what AI is never going to master is how to flourish in the human experience. So I think that's where we should be focusing our energy.
I love that, and I love flourishing as a very visual and tangible kind of direction to be taking humans and teams. And I love this use of language that you're touching on there about resourcing humans, particularly when you think about the industrial revolution, as you suggest, where you had a bunch of really smart people who created machines, and then they said, okay, we need humans to run these machines, but we don't want to have to deal with the humans, so we created the personnel department to do the dealing with the humans. And so in that revolution, we very much decoupled work from humanity. And to your point, we're on a journey, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think in some respects the pendulum has swung too far.
Let's dive into that. We were talking about that pre-show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the United States, North America, is a pretty individualistic society, and so this is not true in all cultures. And as much as I want to create and be in a world where people can be authentic and be who they truly are, we also have a social contract, especially when we're employees. And that social contract was not written for us to be who we are all the time. It comes with an expectation of decorum and professionalism. And so the delta there is our responsibility as individuals. It's not the organization's responsibility. And that could look like I'm working in an organization and the culture does not align with my values. Well, then don't stay there. But don't vilify the culture of that organization if it doesn't fit for you. If you don't like the work-life balance policy or the expectations for the return to work, you have to look at what changed for you in that social contract, because pre-COVID, no one was questioning that. Pre-COVID,
Correct.
We all did the long commutes and we didn't like it, but we did it. And now all of a sudden, everyone is, well, I don't want to do that because I got used to something else. But that breaks the social contract that was never, no one sat down at the table during COVID and said, hey, let's rewrite the social contract. It was a forcing function to adapt.
Yeah.
And the conversation needs to come back to what's the social contract? And we all need to be personally accountable to, is that going to work for me? Or have I changed? And if so, that's okay. But we are each responsible for doing that. I choose not to work in a corporation. I choose to be an entrepreneur. That's a choice that I'm making. And there are pros and cons for it, but it's what works best for me. And I think each person needs to come into these conversations and this notion of like, what does it mean to be an employee? What does it mean to work from a place of accountability? And I think that starts with self-awareness, which I believe is fundamentally misunderstood because it stops at a surface level. The person who says, they start a meeting by saying, I'm really self-aware. I tend to talk a lot. So just so you know, I'm probably going to talk a lot during this meeting. That's not self-awareness, right?
No.
But to truly be self-aware, to be able to recognize our emotions without judgment, to be aware of what is our relationship with ourselves, when are we kind to ourselves, when do we trust ourselves the most, how do we show up when we're under stress, are some examples. The second piece to this is about self-acceptance, which I think in the biohacking performance optimization trend that we've seen over the last 20 years, is something that people turn their nose at, to think that self-acceptance might mean that I'm just going to be passive. I'm just going to accept things as they are and not do anything. The way I think about self-acceptance is accepting where you are right now, because you can't figure out where you want to go unless you know where you are.
Yeah.
You have to have these 2 points to be navigating. And so acceptance is, where am I right now? And sometimes accepting that is really uncomfortable, because it's the honest truth of, I'm not in a good place, or I'm not in a safe environment, or I'm unhappy, or I've let people down. But you have to accept it. And then from that, you can have the accountability to take action. And if you think about Lencioni's model, trust is at the bottom. Everybody loves to talk about trust. But when it gets to accountability, all of a sudden the conversation becomes, it's almost like now we're all speaking in acronyms. The meaning, the thread of the story gets lost. And there's finger pointing, and it's like, well, I don't know if I'm accountable for that. And I think it's because we aren't clear around what we're personally accountable for.
Yeah. There's so many good points in that, Massimo. I've taken about a page and a half of notes, but there's a couple that I want to dive back into. I love the fact that you call out that the pendulum may have swung too far, and that this individuality, I think you said even before the show that individual needs are starting to drive organizations, and maybe at the cost of what the organization's true purpose and impact is supposed to be. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, and maybe as a prompt or an added prompt. It feels like there's an emerging sort of dark side to servant leadership right now, where leaders, particularly middle managers, are like, well, I've got to serve everything that my employees need. And they're running around accommodating and creating space for all of this stuff, but they're not getting their work done. And actually, they're not creating clarity, to your point, on accountability for each of those team members to know how to do the work that's expected of them. So I'm just sensing there's just a lot of noise and disturbance in these teams because no one's really taking that accountability.
It's a really great question, Dane. And the thought that comes to mind for me is, when we're not holding ourselves accountable, it's much more difficult to do so for others. Yeah. And I'll put it in the context of self-compassion. If I'm a leader who is running around trying to accommodate all the individual requests from everybody on my team, and I'm feeling stressed out, burnt out, overwhelmed in doing so, but I haven't slowed down enough to identify why I'm feeling that way. What are those feelings? What's it coming from? What need is it meeting in me that I'm trying to please all people? Answering those questions can inform that person's values and clarity for them on what are their boundaries.
Yeah.
What do they stand for? What are their expectations of themselves, and are they meeting those expectations? And then to take it forward. I can't remember who it was, but on another one of your episodes, someone was talking about being on camera for Zoom or Teams meetings.
Yes.
And I remember, like, during COVID, people were working from home, their kids were home, the world was in, a bit of turmoil. People not wanting to be on camera then makes sense.
Yeah.
But if we're now in this kind of new hybrid work, you wouldn't show up to a meeting with your hoodie on, or you wouldn't show up not wearing work appropriate attire, or you wouldn't show up on a call and make sure that you don't have the proper equipment so people could hear you, or that your laptop wasn't working. So to me, it is about being personally accountable means like, what am I responsible for? Well, I'm responsible for being a good employee, a good teammate, a good leader, a good contributor, a good person. Those are my responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the company to let me work when I want, however I want. With the caveat, unless the company's contract with you is that is what they're going to do.
Yes.
And there are some companies that do that. And if that's the case, great. But if it's not, we can't vilify an organization because they say, hey, what we want to do is have people show up and be in person. And because I would like to believe that those organizations are doing so because they know the power of social connection.
Yeah.
And to be seen is important.
Yep.
And to be able to see others is important. And you don't always have to be on video to do that, but that's a show of shared commitment in, yeah, maybe I didn't have time to take a shower today, but I'm going to do my best to show up because I care about you as somebody on my team, because I care about you as a person who's working with me towards a shared goal.
Yes. No, I really like that. And I think that the second point that I noted down that I think you're leaning into there as well, particularly going back to this concept of the social contract, certain organizations are saying we're returned to office now, or you need to do these meetings in core hours and you have to be on your screen, or whatever else it might be that they're saying is required to do the work on the team. I get the sense that there's nothing wrong with the individuality. There's nothing wrong with individuals saying this is how I show up best and this is how I want to work. But we're probably going to come into a bit of a cycle here where we're almost in Great Resignation 2.0. I think a lot of people as companies get back to their core purpose and how they're going to operate and do the work. A lot of people are going to opt out of certain businesses and into other businesses that better fit them. So that could be a really scary moment for a lot of leaders and teams, but it actually could be a wonderfully freeing experience as people actually start landing where they truly belong and doing work that they feel good about and that suits their individual needs too.
It's all a choice.
Yeah.
It's all a choice. We all want to have choices until we're in the position to make one. And then we realize, oh, making choices that's really difficult. I spent the last year and a half remodeling this house, Dane, and I'd always dreamt someday I want to remodel a home. It'd be so fun. You get to pick everything out. I hated it. I was overwhelmed with choices. It was so stressful, but I thought it would be this great experience. But the reality is they're all choices, and companies need to determine what kind of choices they want to make to bring in the right employees and how to be flexible. And I don't think that this is a rigid contract, or that the contract can't be something that evolves over time.
Yes.
But it is a conversation that has to happen. And it is a conversation that has to happen where there's some shared agreement around what is expected from everybody. And I think we've lost sight of that in moving towards trying to be all things to all people. And some of the most fulfilling work experiences in my life weren't the easiest. I worked incredibly hard. I worked with difficult people. It was uncomfortable. It was a struggle, but I learned so much from that. So are we benefiting ourselves by making everything more comfortable? And I'm not suggesting that we make things, I'm not suggesting everybody start cold plunging. We don't need to add difficulty into the business that if people don't want it. But there's a richness to the challenge.
Yes.
There's a richness to what happens when you get up and you get dressed and you got to do your long commute. But there's a sense of pride in knowing like I worked hard today. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people take a lot of value from that. I guess going back to Maslow, it's around that self-actualization. But what you shared there around the social contract is really interesting, because what I heard you say, Massimo, was it's not a rigid agreement. It's not like policy that comes down from the heavens. It could actually be an interactive event. You could sit down and talk to team members about, well, how are we going to agree to show up and do our work together? And what I'm hearing then, if that's the case, is maybe that social contract can be a little bit different in this regional office or in this department because leaders are working with their teams to kind of set out a little bit more on their ways of working or ways of holding meetings or whatever it might be.
One of the biggest challenges of being in a leadership position, and it only gets more challenging the higher you go in an organization, is knowing that whatever decision you make isn't going to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's true for anybody who's a parent. You realize any decision you make, you pick one restaurant, not everybody's happy with it. But that just comes with the territory of having that responsibility of being the one that has the burden to choose and trying to make the best choice with all the data that you can.
Yeah.
And so these are difficult conversations, and they need to be ongoing conversations. And at any point in time, people have an opportunity to choose, do I still want to be here?
Yeah.
Or choose, do I want to have a conversation with my manager and ask for something different?
Yeah.
I was working with a client who has a young kid at home and said, I work from home about 2 days a month, but I never know what day it's going to be. It just kind of whenever it fits in. And I thought, well, would it be helpful if you knew that it was, the first and third Tuesday of the month? Would that be helpful? Oh, very helpful. Then I could plan around it. Have you talked to your manager about that? No, I don't want to talk to my manager about it.
Yeah.
But what was happening is they were doing it anyways. So they were actually working from home, but not being transparent about it.
Yes.
Now, as a leader or a manager, if I found out about that, I'd be like, that is exactly the kind of behavior that I don't want on my team.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be able to have a transparent conversation of tell me what it is that you're looking for, and I'll do whatever I can to try and meet that.
Yeah.
But within the social contract, we may not be able to.
Correct.
So maybe it is going to be that you're just going to have to pick 2 random days out of the month. But at least now it's in the open, because there was an emotional toll that was happening for this client.
Yeah.
By keeping it wasn't a full secret, but by not being fully open about something they were doing. It didn't feel right to them.
Yeah.
And those types of things happen in every organization around the world, Dane. And my belief is that it is those types of things that are the single biggest drain of resources in organizations today.
Yeah. Takes energy away.
Yes. And they're small, but they add up and they metastasize and snowball.
Yep. Yeah, that's really interesting. And we've had a few guests come on the show that talk about sort of restoring energy to teams. Curveball question, Massimo, are there any technologies or methodologies out there that you see that help leaders, particularly with large or distributed teams, to kind of go in and do that scan of where are people's emotions? Are people practicing self-compassion? Where might some of those hidden tensions and energy drains be in a team?
The ability to tap into where people are at through technology at scale is quite impressive. But the reliability of that data is in question, significantly in question. And to me, this is about the skill development to create a mindset. And so from my standpoint, the investment isn't in more technology. The investment is developing the skills for each individual in the organization to have a practice in self-compassion, to have self-awareness, self-acceptance, and the personal accountability.
Yeah.
And from that place, now you have all the cells in the body are healing themselves, right?
Yeah.
So the organism is going to be stronger as a result. They all have a common language around self-compassion as well. And they all understand the value of accepting what their feelings, but not labeling themselves as that feeling.
Yeah.
And they all are resourced with what they need to do in order to make themselves feel better. So now you have these people that are more resourced. Then when you go in to have conversations with people about what's going on, they're equipped to be articulate around what it is. They're equipped to communicate what it is that they're actively doing. They're equipped to ask for what it is that they need, but they're informed in that request, as opposed to, I don't know, I'm just feeling overwhelmed, or I'm stressed, or, I'm just having an off day. I can't tell you how many times I would start these large workshops and ask people as they'd come into the room, how are you? How have you been? Been a few months since I've seen you. I'm good, busy. Yeah, I'm good, I'm busy.
Yeah.
It's the same answer.
Yeah.
Good, busy is not how you're doing.
No.
Right? That doesn't tell us anything. But they didn't have the vocabulary for it. So I didn't blame them, but it's like, isn't that interesting that because they knew by that point that when I asked, I was genuinely asking. I'm not a stranger.
Yes.
But they didn't know how they really were until we kind of stepped into it. So I think we need to be able to skill people with this, and then the conversations that follow shift. And that's how you know. But most importantly, people need to know where they're at so they can be proactive in saying, here's where I'm at. So at the beginning of a meeting, if someone just says, I'm tired today, like, well, what does that really mean? What can the team do for you because you're tired today? Does that mean that you don't want to be in this meeting? Do we need to take something off your plate? Or is it just that, I'm just a little tired? I live in Seattle. The gray weather's coming in a few months, and I'm going to have some off days as a result. Not feeling as good as I do when it's beautiful and sunny out. But it all comes down to each individual having that accountability, and without it, we're left with not really knowing. What we're left with is a felt sense that something's off, and few things are as worse as that feeling of being on a team and knowing something's off, but not knowing what it is.
It gnaws at you.
Oh, your nights, your weekends, your time with your family, your vacations.
It hurts the whole team. Yeah.
Yeah. You ruminate, then you start to make up stories. Well, what if it's this?
Yeah.
And in worst case scenarios, the stories go to, well, if it's about me, I'm gonna defend up. So I'm gonna start telling a story about why I'm right, even though this is all make believe. We don't even know because you haven't had the conversation.
Oh, I feel like I could go on having this conversation for hours, Massimo. There's so much wisdom and so much practical application that you've got in your work. Just to kind of highlight a few key pieces there, I really thought it was neat the way that you described that team exercise about going in and checking in with people. How are you feeling? What do you need? Great questions. And then, the other big piece that I thought really stands out is that humans have cycles, and the fact that we've all got to get more compassionate, more self-aware of like where we're at on any given day. And how to move through that appropriately as individuals, as team members. This piece that we really dove into here around the social contract and creating clarity around accountability and how we're going to do work together, that seems like a reset that any team can start doing tomorrow. It's good conversation. So I love just how practical and accessible that was. And this last piece around, hey, making choices is hard, but let's at least create some common language and framework for people to look at the self-awareness, the self-acceptance, and the personal accountability. It's kind of just going to that next level. So tons of stuff there. I'm excited to read the book. I'm sure a few other listeners will. How do our listeners find you and your business or your book?
Oh, thank you, Dane. And a great summary of what was a really rich conversation for me as well. People can find me at MassimoBackus.com. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Massimo Backus that's out there on the web. And the book, Human First, Leader Second, comes out on September 10th. That's in less than a week. And
Wonderful.
It's on all the major retailers. And if people do pick it up and read it, I would love to hear what your thoughts are, what worked, what didn't, what resonated. And if you have any questions about it, this is something that I feel is a life's purpose. It's a life's work. I did not create self-compassion. It's not my idea. I just want to be a messenger in spreading the word.
That's awesome. It's a great word to spread, and I'm excited to see more of it and more teams. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Dane.
Thanks, Massimo.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.